Yeah, well, thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be joining this kind of cult meeting in the temple here. So if that was...
We're having the sacrificial dinner tonight,
yeah.
by the way.
Rather than start with Nouriel Roubini, let me start with the great 1960s comedian Bob Newhart. Anyone remember him? And his sketch about Sir Walter Raleigh bringing back the first consignment of tobacco, and he's speaking to someone who sponsored his voyage. He's saying, you do what with it, Walt? You roll it up, and then what do you do with it after you roll it up? What, do you stick it in your ear? No, you stick it between your lips, and then you set fire to it? Are you kidding me, Walt? Well, this is a bit like that. So what, you roll it up and set fire to it? I mean, in 300 or 400 years' time, what you're saying might somehow have entered the real world and become the norm. But right now, you would have to sort of, take a couple of months in an asylum and then come back and watch a video of yourself doing that and realize just how completely bonkers most of it sounds. I'm sorry to say, really. I've described this in The Spectator as being the sphere of the dope smoker, affluent, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, and I see that, that's not at all a fair description of this crowd here this morning. But, it
do I get to respond today?
It is, yes, you do in a moment, but let me just
wonderful.
get to the end of a paragraph here.
You will, Saif, I promise.
I mean, here you are, you create something that is extremely volatile in price, that attracts lots of gamblers without wishing to make too broad a characterization. Of course, North Asia is where most of the activity is. So not surprising that the supposed founder or founders of Bitcoin should adopt a Japanese pseudonym, because it's really, if I think back over my 43 years in financial markets or writing about them, observing them, this is so like so many previous cults and waves of delusion, greed, risk-taking, being wrapped up in some smart, ideological language. So that's where I start.
Right. Let me.
I could warm up a bit if you let me go on.
Why don't we take that as your opening statement?
All right.
I don't want to run to a rash conclusion, but I get the feeling you may not be entirely in favor of it. But let me get a general reaction from you to what you've heard.
I think this is just simple no-coiner confusion. The guy hasn't read anything beyond what Nouriel Roubini rambles on the internet, and so he.
No, I read your book.
Clearly you haven't.
I should have tried reading the Turkish edition, really, but I did read it.
All right.
Clearly you would have understood equally as much. But the point is this. He mistakes the Bitcoin protocol for the Bitcoin exchanges. And this is as silly as thinking that if your dollars get stolen from your pocket, then the US Federal Reserve has been compromised. And, for all of your racist stereotyping of Japanese, putting that aside for a minute, it's a global phenomenon where people all over the world are getting into this kind of thing. And the reason is because there's profit to be made from this, because we're witnessing the monetization of an asset. In 10 years, it's gone from zero to more than $100 billion. That's going to be volatile. A lot of money is going to be made on the rises and on the losses, and that's natural. But of course, as a high-time preference Keynesian, he cannot understand the idea that people might talk about something, not about the next quarterly earnings or the next interest rate meeting. So, as long as I can't deliver this Bitcoin standard to him completely operational and functional within the next, say, 5 weeks or so, then this is maybe in 300-400 years or something like that. Likely it won't be during your lifetime where the world gets rid of all of these currencies, but you know what? Many of us will still be around, and we will have to deal with the consequences of what your monetary system and your overindulgent 20th century excess of credit and war and garbage has left us as a society. By God, we're going to clean it up.
So, well, this is going well, isn't it?
Yes.
This is making the Brexit debate sound almost civilized.
Let's think back to when the so-called Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto is busy writing his piece of software and his famous white paper and so on. The world was having an economic crisis. It was propped up by the imperfect mechanisms of quantitative easing, of ultra-low interest rates and so on. That big, huge, biggest ever government and central bank intervention actually did what it said on the tin.
No,
and all
this
the
is like the
time you
arsonist
guys
who
are
takes
out there
credit for-
inventing this piece of horse shit to
Sorry.
replace it.
This is no. This is exactly like the arsonist who takes credit for taking down the fire because he was the first on scene. You're not the first on scene because you're the first fireman. You're the arsonist. This financial system wouldn't have blown up without central bank
I knew you'd say
low interest rate. Of course. Well, how do financial markets collapse?
Greenspan left the window open. You lot burgled it. That's
No. Not me, lot. There's no lot. The point is this. Yes, Bitcoin may be the ideological money of anarcho-capitalist dope smokers now. But the point is that government bureaucrats and coke-headed bankers and their little bureaucrats in the Bank of England now face competition, okay? They had gotten away with many decades, maybe even centuries, of just using their monopoly position and the role of governments used to monopoly of force to enforce their monopoly of money. Now we have a serious competitor.
Tell us about the fork that created Bitcoin Cash. I mean, that's a whole
Bitcoin
other
Cash-
layer of Bitcoin, isn't
Yeah.
it? That just
No,
some of
it's-
you people decided you
is-
wanted more Bitcoin to play with, so you created some more, and then you
Bitcoin
call that a
Cash-
fork,
Bitcoin
and you
Cash-
say original Bitcoin. That's still pure.
No. Bitcoin Cash and
immaculate
all the other
conception.
altcoins are an IQ test. And basically, if you fall for them, you've failed.
So your position is, because there are plenty of other cryptocurrencies around, you don't like them. I think your position is that it's my way or the highway. It's Bitcoin or shitcoin.
Precisely. Yes. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
so,
The way that I would put it is
hold
Bitcoin
on.
has a chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
None of the others do. Bitcoin is the first money that we've ever invented that is harder than gold, which is why I find it immensely interesting. Even if it fails, I think it's an astonishing economic experiment.
And you don't fear that Bitcoin, as you describe it, as this only hard currency, will simply be overwhelmed by the growth of hundreds, thousands of alt currencies, because that's where the money's to be made. It'd be fine for wacko academics like you to stay glued to the original immaculate conception of Bitcoin, but
Yes.
all these guys out here just want to make money.
That's
so
true.
they want the things that are even more volatile.
No, that's an
They
excellent
want to be
question.
in on the ICO scam.
That's an excellent question, but you see, we live in an
It
easy
is.
money environment because it's easy to get loans. You can borrow money to buy a goddamn TV. So you can always get easy
What's
money.
wrong with that?
What's wrong with that is that, nothing is wrong with that as long as you find somebody to lend you the money.
Sure.
But when the bank creates the money out of thin air, then it forces everybody who uses that currency to finance your
But
TV.
the growth of debt and the ability of people to borrow has resulted in a massive increase in global living standards.
The growth in prosperity and the reduction in poverty around the world has come about not because the central banks of the world have printed more money, otherwise Venezuela would be the richest country in the world today. It has come about because of technology, because of capital accumulation, and that what drives that is hard, sound money. And that's why the 19th century was a far more prosperous and peaceful time than the 20th century.
Absolutely. And we got to send kids up chimneys as well and kept them out of trouble so we could clean them.
Did them a world of good,
and we could,
if you ask me.
We could say, yeah, that's the... I didn't want to ask you because I feared that would be your answer.
I think a reader in the room, James Hume, are you here? Stick your hand up. There you are. Hi. How are you? Wrote to me to say Venezuelans love Bitcoin. Well, of course they may do, because it's chaos in their country. What's really important is democracy and the rule of law. And what you're talking about is something which defies democracy because you think it's smarter than actual democracy.
What people reveal in stupid popularity contests called elections is nothing next to the importance of what they reveal with their actions in the market. No, this idea that Bitcoin's rise has to be destructive economically, I think is a very big misconception. Very few people hold significant amounts of wealth in their government currency. Very few people have a lot of cash hidden up. Very few people have a lot of percentage of their wealth in cash. So, if the value of cash collapses, or if people shift from one money standard to the other, the amount of losses are not going to be that important, because we're not going to witness the collapse of the pound and then stand around with nothing, no alternative. If Bitcoin continues to grow, it'll grow one user at a time, shifting from the pound to Bitcoin, and that reduces demand for the pound, but the other side of it is also reduces the supply of pounds, because fewer and fewer people will be working with the banking system, which will create fewer and fewer pounds.
Sure as eggs. One of these days there's going to be another financial crisis. It's going to be driven by greed and delusion and excessive volumes of trading.
Greed
and
and delusion are always
Next
there.
time
Why?
round, it may well be in the cryptocurrency zone, and the pure Bitcoin may still be there. But the cryptocurrency zone will have grown enormous. It will cause some sort of crash, and guess what? Central banks will have to intervene, governments will have to intervene, and everybody will be briefly a Keynesian again, except you, and you'll be banged up in the Bitcoin asylum.
They can't intervene. This is the thing. This is the thing that people don't get. Relics from the 20th century still haven't gotten the idea. They still.
I am a relic of the 20th
Yes,
century.
exactly.
I'll accept that label.
They don't understand this notion that, you know, if all of this cryptocurrency shitcoin industrial complex collapses, nobody can come bail people out with
Just want to
Bitcoin.
get some more questions. Have you got a hand up, or are you just waving? Yeah, right. We'll keep your hand up and we'll get a mic. And then there's a gentleman up there. Keep your hand up. We'll get to the chap in the shirt. Yes, sir.
Do you see Bitcoin as, is it possible for it to coexist with easy money as a sort of store of value, and fiat can be used as the medium of exchange?
They could coexist in the short run, and by short run in my book, that's, you know, 50, 100, 150 years or so. But I think in the long run, I can't see how any other currency will hold demand, will hold value when it's useless as a store of value for demand. I mean, the only thing that gives currency value is the fact that people want to hold it in cash balances. That's what gives it value. The fact that you want to go to bed tonight with this cash in your pocket so that tomorrow you can buy it for whatever you want. But as long as we have Venezuelas and Zimbabwe's and Turkeys and Argentinas and all of these countries destroying their currencies, as long as we have the IMF and the World Bank advising these countries on how to destroy their currencies in a sustainable manner so that they continue doing it and milking them of debt money over time, as long as we have that, Bitcoin demand is just going to continue to rise. That's how I see it. We're witnessing a genuine grassroots alternative to central banking emerging. That's why the subtitle of my book is The Decentralized Alternative to Central Banking.
But
And yes, it is volatile, but it works, and it doesn't have
Yes,
Keynesians
but
in charge of it.
it's so volatile that you simply can't imagine it as a reserve asset. What sensible
you can.
institution would hold a thing that goes to $20,000 and down to $6,000?
We're still at the very early stages of it. It took a lot of time to build the current monetary system. It's going to take a lot of time with Bitcoin. Effectively, what's happening is all of these second-layer solutions are going to be developed on top of Bitcoin over time, and that's just going to lead to more and more payments in Bitcoin being settled on the second layer rather than on the first layer. And that's how Bitcoin can scale.
My answer to the gentleman's question from the back is I think there will be a continuing explosion of the cryptocurrency world for some time to come, in which Bitcoin will shrink.
The interesting thing is what happens in the next recession when people have less stupid money to gamble. That's, I think, the real test. What's going to happen then? Will Bitcoin behave like a gambling asset or like a safe haven asset?
Because we're not in an easy time zone here.
Okay.
I'm keeping us to time. The final session will involve everybody up here, including our dynamic duo, Statler.
Yeah,
We also do kids'
We're really
birthday
going to
parties,
take
by
the
the way.
handbrake off.
The Statler and Hilton of the Muppet Show. We got them here. We'll take a break. But before you go, before you dash off for your coffee, we'll see you back in 20 minutes. What a great round of applause for our panel, though.
Cheers, mate.